Today, I'm going to tell you a story so haunting it leaves you breathless, set in the unforgiving heart of the Wild West, where dust choked the air and danger rode with every sunrise. It's a place where fate collides with survival, and one wrong step can erase a life forever. It all began with a single moment, a small act that seemed harmless, yet powerful enough to change everything. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Arizona Territory, 1867. The tall windows of the one-room schoolhouse still held the day's last amber light as Etta Cole straightened the papers on her desk, setting things in order for a tomorrow she assumed would come. At 24, she had spent 3 hard years carving out a life of her own in the mining town of Copper Ridge. Far from Boston's tight collars and tighter judgments, far from the quiet disgrace left behind by James's betrayal. "Miss Cole." Etta looked up to see Nell Rowe, the blacksmith's 10-year-old daughter, hovering in the doorway with nervous pride. "I finished it," Nell said, holding out a thin book. "Just like you asked." Etta smiled as she took the dog-eared copy of Little Women from the girl's hands. "So," Etta asked, "what did you think of Jo?" Nell grinned. "She's like you, strong, says what she thinks." Heat crept into Etta's cheeks. Back east, those same traits had earned her nothing but sharp looks and colder whispers. Here, in this rough and dust-bitten place, they had kept her standing. "You'd best hurry home," Etta said, glancing at the sky darkening beyond the windows. "Your father will be wondering." After Nell left, Etta gathered her things, blew out the lantern, and locked the schoolhouse behind her. The walk back to her small cabin followed a path she knew by heart. Past the general store where Otis Kern still gave credit when the mines ran dry, beyond the saloon she never entered, and finally past the sheriff's office. Boone Rask tipped his hat as she passed. "Evenin', Miss Cole." "Evenin', Sheriff," she replied with a nod. "Quiet day, about as quiet as we get," he said, though his eyes told a different story. "Heard talk the Hail Runners are moving north out of Tucson." Etta felt her chest tighten. "Virex Hale's men? I thought they'd been pushed into Mexico." "So did the rest of us," Boone said grimly. "Best keep your doors bolted tonight." Etta hurried the rest of the way home, the warning beating in her ears. Inside the cabin, she locked the door, drew the curtains, and lit a small oil lamp. The room held little. Mostly books, a change of clothes, and a faded photograph of her parents, gone 5 years now. Sleep came in broken pieces. Dreams carried her back to Boston parlors and polite smiles that hid sharp truths. Somewhere in the dark, she heard hoofbeats. Far off at first, then closer. She woke with a gasp. The sound was real. Then came gunfire. Screams tore through the night. Etta leapt from her bed, hands shaking as she reached for her robe. An orange glow flashed against the walls. She cracked the door and saw riders, more than she could count, charging down the main street with torches raised and rifles blazing. The Hail Runners had come. Frozen, she watched flames swallow the general store. Otis Kern ran out, only to fall to a single shot. Lydia Kern followed him, her cry cut short just as brutally. The saloon burned next. Then the bank. When the riders turned toward the homes, Etta knew she had no choice. She pulled on her clothes, grabbed her mother's locket, the small pouch of coins she'd saved, and her father's old pocket knife. Slipping out the back window, she vanished into the night as fire climbed her porch. She ran for the hills, driven by the screams behind her. A bullet tore past her ear, shattering bark from a pine. Etta ducked, lungs burning, and fled deeper into the dark, leaving Copper Ridge and everything she had built in flames behind her. Morning broke with her curled tight inside a narrow ravine, far from what was left of Copper Ridge. Smoke still smeared the horizon, a dull gray stain against a pale pink sky. Etta Cole's throat burned with thirst, and her feet were raw and bleeding from days of flight over stone and scrub in thin shoes. Her dress hung in tatters. Ash and dried tears streaked her face. For 3 days, she wandered without direction, catching rainwater in shallow rock bowls and eating only the few berries she knew would not kill her. On the 4th day, weak and swaying, she climbed a low rise and stopped. A cavalry outpost lay in the valley below. Hope surged through her, sharp and desperate, lending strength to her legs as she stumbled downhill. But with every step closer, unease crept in. The fort stood open and silent. Doors swung loose. Supplies lay scattered as if abandoned in haste. "They rode out 2 weeks ago." The voice came from behind her. Etta spun, fingers scrambling for her father's knife. The man standing there made the blood drain from her face. Tall, copper-skinned, black hair braided in 2 long ropes, his expression carved from stone. He wore buckskin leggings and a plain cotton shirt, a bandana tied across his brow. But it was his eyes that froze her in place, dark, steady, watching her without a flicker of mercy. Apache, the stories had always traveled faster than the truth, tales of scalping, torture, women taken and never returned. Etta lifted the knife, though her hand shook. "Stay back," she said, her voice thin and breaking. He did not flinch. "That blade won't save you from thirst," he said calmly, his English flawless despite a faint accent. "And it won't save you from the men hunting you." Her heart lurched. "What men?" "The ones who burned your town." He nodded south. "They are searching for survivors." Fear slammed into her chest. "How many?" "3, he replied. "They are following your trail." The knife suddenly felt like dead weight. "How do you know about the town?" she demanded. "I saw the smoke," he said. "I watched them kill." His gaze never left her. "You are the schoolteacher." It wasn't a question. Etta swallowed hard. "How would you know that?" "I have seen you," he said simply, "with the children." He stepped forward. Etta retreated until her back struck the fort's sun-bleached wall. "You have 2 paths," he said. "Die here, of thirst, of bullets, or to the desert, or come with me." "Why would you help me?" she snapped, the knife still raised. For the first time, something shifted in his eyes. Not warmth, but a crack in the cold. "I have my reasons." She hesitated, then asked, "Your name?" "My people call me Kainu." "Like the bull." The word slipped out before she could stop herself. A faint nod. "For my stubbornness." He studied her. "And yours?" "Etta," she said. "Etta Cole." The wind carried a distant whinny. Horses, close enough to hear. "The men hunting you will reach this place before sundown," Kainu said. "Choose now." Etta thought of Virex Hale, of the Hale runners, of what they had done to Lydia Kern before killing her. She looked at Kainu's unreadable face and felt the truth settle hard in her chest. "I'll go with you." Kainu turned without another word and started toward the mountains, their dark ridges cutting the horizon. Etta followed, leaving behind the last fragments of the life she had built, stepping into the unknown beside a man whose people had been cast as monsters in every white story she had ever heard. The irony was not lost on her. She was running from white men whose cruelty she had seen with her own eyes, straight into the protection of an Apache whose savagery she had only heard about in whispered stories. By the time the sun sank low, they had crossed miles of broken stone and steep ridges. Etta Cole's feet, already torn raw from days of wandering, left faint streaks of blood across the rocks behind her. Kainu moved like a shadow, efficient, alert, stopping now and then to listen to the wind or scan the distant horizon. He offered no words, no comfort. When night finally closed in, he guided her to a shallow cave carved into the hillside. "Rest," he said. It was the first word he had spoken in hours. From a leather pouch at his waist, he pulled out strips of dried meat and handed her a water skin. "Eat, then sleep." Etta tore into the tough, salty meat and drank deeply, even though she knew she should save the water. "Thank you," she murmured. Kainu gave no reply. He moved to the mouth of the cave and sat there, a dark outline against the deepening night. "Where are we going?" Etta asked at last. For a moment she thought he would ignore her. Then, without turning, he answered, "To my people." "And what happens to me there?" This time he looked back, the moon catching half his face. "That depends on what you are willing to do to stay alive." A chill slid through her, sharper than the desert air. "What does that mean?" He studied her with eyes that gave nothing away. "A woman alone has no place among my people, or among yours." He paused. "But a wife would be protected." The meaning settled slowly. "You want me to marry you?" The words sounded unreal as she spoke them. "It would be a marriage of protection," Kainu said plainly. "You would have food, shelter, safety." "And what would you have?" Etta demanded, suspicion flaring. "My reasons are my own," he replied. Then, seeing the fear in her face, he added, "I will not touch you. That is not why I make this offer." Etta folded her arms around herself, her thoughts racing. Marriage to an Apache warrior, just to survive, felt impossible. But what choice did she truly have? Return to white settlements where Virex Hale and the Hale runners might still be hunting her, where a woman alone would be eyed with distrust, or worse. "I need time," she said at last. "Until morning," Kainu agreed, turning his attention back to the dark. Etta lay down on the hard stone floor, certain sleep would never come. Yet exhaustion dragged her under, pulling her into dreams of burning buildings, James's false smile, and strange visions of wide desert skies, and a pair of dark eyes that saw everything without revealing anything. Dawn arrived harsh and unforgiving. She woke to find Kainu already on his feet, gathering his things. Her body screamed with pain as she sat up. "Have you decided?" he asked, without ceremony. The morning light made the night's conversation feel unreal, but her situation had not changed. "Yes," she said, steadier than she felt. "I'll accept your offer," Etta continued, forcing herself upright despite her blistered feet. "But there are conditions." Kainu's brow lifted slightly, the first sign of expression she had seen from him. "Until I can safely build a life elsewhere," Etta Cole said, steadying her breath. "And as you stated, you will not demand certain marital claims. Is that all?" Kainu asked, a trace of something close to amusement threading his voice. Etta lifted her chin. "I will not be treated as property, or as a servant. I enter this agreement by choice, for survival, and for balance between us." Kainu studied her in silence. "Among my people," he said at last, "women are not owned. They are the center of the family, the strength that holds it together." He stepped closer, his presence filling the cave's narrow space. "My protection comes with respect, Etta Cole. Do not confuse my quiet for contempt." The calm weight of his words unsettled her. For the first time, she did not see a feared warrior or a reluctant rescuer, but a man shaped by rules as firm as stone. "Then we are agreed," she said softly. Kainu nodded once. "We leave now. The distance is great." They set out beneath a rising sun, its harsh light carving long shadows across the desert. Every step sent pain through Etta's feet, but she swallowed it down. Kainu noticed anyway. By midday, he stopped beside a thin ribbon of water. "Remove your shoes." She hesitated, then did as told. Her stockings were shredded, her feet swollen, cracked, bleeding. Without comment, Kainu knelt before her. From a pouch, he drew crushed herbs mixed with animal fat. His hands, strong yet careful, spread the salve across her wounds. Cool relief followed instantly. "Thank you," Etta whispered, unsettled by his closeness and by the gentleness she hadn't expected. Kainu only nodded. He tore strips from his own shirt and wrapped her feet with practiced care. "This will hold until we reach camp. There you will have moccasins." As they walked on, Etta found herself watching him, the straight line of his shoulders, the quiet certainty in every movement. She had grown up on stories of savagery, yet this man showed only discipline and a stern kind of regard. "How did you learn English?" she asked, as they threaded through a narrow canyon. For so long he said nothing. She assumed he would not answer. Then, quietly, "I was taken to a white school as a boy." 7 years, she heard in those words. Years taken, not given. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" he asked, not turning. "For being taken from your family." He paused then, glancing back at her, his expression unreadable. "Most white women would say it was for my benefit, to make me less what they feared." Etta met his gaze. "I've seen enough of civilization these past days to doubt its virtue." Something shifted in Kainu's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or reconsideration. He gave a small nod and continued forward. The silence that followed felt altered, heavier with understanding. As the sun sank on their second day of travel, they crested a ridge. Below them, hidden in a sheltered valley at the foot of the mountain, lay the Apache camp. Dozens of wickiups formed a loose circle. Smoke curled upward from cooking fires. Women moved between the shelters, their figures steady and unafraid. Children darted between the shelters, their laughter cutting through the smoke, while warriors stood watch along the camp's edge. "Your people?" Etta Cole murmured, her nerves tightening. "Our people," Kainu corrected calmly. She drew a steady breath. "I still agree." Kainu searched her face, weighing every flicker of doubt. Then he nodded. "Then come. We will be married before the sun falls." As they walked into the camp, Etta felt the weight of many eyes. Women paused mid-task. Children fell silent. Warriors straightened. Kainu moved with quiet authority, not proud, but unshakably sure of his place. An elderly woman stepped from the largest wickiup. Her hair was silver, her face etched deep with years, her posture unbent by age. "My grandmother," Kainu said under his breath. "Sarah. She carries the wisdom of our clan." Sarah approached, her dark eyes sweeping over Etta's torn dress and bandaged feet. Without warning, she cupped Etta's face in rough hands, turning it side to side as if judging stone. Etta stiffened, forcing herself to stand still. Sarah spoke in Apache, sharp, flowing sounds Etta could not follow. Kainu answered in the same tongue, respectful yet resolute. Sarah's brows lifted at his words. She released Etta and circled her slowly, continuing to speak, repeating Kainu's name as if questioning him. At last, Sarah stopped and switched to heavily accented English. "My grandson says you will be his wife. He says white men burned your home and left you alone." "Yes," Etta said, finding her voice. "That is true." "Why should we take you in?" Sarah asked bluntly. "Your army hunts us, kills us. Your people steal our land." Etta met her gaze. "I have no people now. The men you speak of murdered everyone I knew and destroyed everything I owned. I seek only to live, and I offer respect." Sarah studied her in silence, then turned to Kainu and spoke again in Apache. He answered with a single word. "Come," Sarah said to Etta. "If you will be wife to Kainu, you cannot look like a white schoolteacher. The spirits must see you as you will be." What followed stripped Etta down to her resolve. Inside Sarah's wickiup, her ruined dress and underclothes were removed. Sarah and two younger women scrubbed her skin with herbs and water, worked knots from her hair, and braided it with careful hands. They dressed her in a plain buckskin gown stitched with beadwork. Their quiet laughter told Etta she was the subject of their curiosity, if not their humor. When they finished, Sarah held up a polished piece of metal. Etta scarcely recognized the woman staring back. Sun-browned, steady-eyed, no longer the Boston teacher she once was. "Now," Sarah said, "you will be married." Outside, the camp had formed a wide circle. Kainu stood at its center, bare-chested, his skin marked with red and white paint, ceremonial buckskins settling around his frame. Etta was guided to face him, aware of every watching eye. The ceremony was brief, spoken in Apache, with Sarah presiding. Simple words, ancient and binding, spoken before the sun slipped below the horizon. Etta Cole understood none of the words spoken, yet she felt the weight of the moment settle over her like heat before a storm. Kainu took her hands in his, steady, controlled, his grip firm without force. He held her gaze as Sarah bound their wrists together with a thin leather cord, the knot pulled tight and final. When it ended, the camp broke into sharp calls and brief whoops, sounds Etta assumed marked approval. Not every face was welcoming. Some eyes remained guarded. A few were openly cold. Kainu guided her away to a wickiup set slightly apart from the others. "This is your home now," he said, lifting the flap. Inside, the space was simple but warm. Sleeping furs, a small fire pit, baskets stocked with essentials. Etta stood still at the center, suddenly aware that they were alone, married, and standing in what served as both shelter and bedroom. As if sensing her unease, Kainu crossed to the far side. "I will sleep there," he said, indicating a place near the entrance. He nodded toward a space half hidden by a hanging blanket. "You will have privacy." Etta inclined her head, relief easing her chest, accompanied by an unfamiliar flicker of something she refused to name. "Thank you for keeping our agreement." Kainu studied her briefly. "Rest. Tomorrow you will learn the duties of a wife among the people." With that, he stepped outside. Left alone, Etta sat on the furs, stunned by the path her life had taken. Schoolteacher, fugitive, survivor, wife, all within the span of days. That night she heard Kainu return and settle into his place apart from hers. The camp's noise slowly faded. In the darkness, she finally wept. Quiet tears for her students, for the townspeople who had welcomed her, for the life she had built and lost. Beneath it all lay uncertainty about the future she had bound herself to, however temporarily, beside a man as unreadable as the desert. Days slipped into weeks. Each morning before first light, Etta rose to join the women at the stream. They hauled water and scrubbed clothes in near silence, broken only by brief exchanges in Apache she could not follow. Their treatment of her ranged from wary curiosity to open resentment, but none offered more than necessary gestures. Sarah was the exception. The old woman claimed Etta as her reluctant student, teaching her what was required to endure life within the camp. "No, no," Sarah scolded, as Etta strained to grind corn between stones. You will ruin your wrists. Let the stone work. Etta adjusted her grip, sweat running down her temples beneath the midday sun. Like this? Sarah gave a curt nod. For a white woman, you are not completely useless. From Sarah, it was high praise. True to his word, Kainu kept his distance. He left before dawn, and often returned after Etta had withdrawn behind her screen. When they spoke, it was only of necessity. Warnings not to wander, instructions on dangerous plants, brief explanations of customs she was expected to respect. Still, Etta often felt his gaze on her as she worked among the women, not threatening, but watchful, measuring her place among his people. One evening, as she sat outside their wickiup mending a torn basket under Sahra's direction, she sensed a shift. A ripple of tension moved through the camp. Conversations hushed. Warriors straightened. Something was coming. Warriors clustered in tight, urgent circles. Women swept children into the wickiups, their movements quick and silent. Even the dogs felt it, ears pricked, bodies tense, low growls rumbling in their throats. Kainu appeared beside Etta Cole, his face hard, sharpened by concern. "Go inside," he said. "Stay there until I return." She set her work aside. "What's happening?" "Soldiers," he replied. "A patrol moving down from the north." Fear seized her chest. "Will there be fighting?" "We will hide," Kainu said. "This camp is well hidden, but we must be careful." His gaze lingered on her pale skin, the light brown hair braided but impossible to disguise. Understanding struck her at once. "Because I'm white," Etta said quietly. "They would claim I was taken." Kainu nodded. "It would give them the excuse they want." That night, Etta lay awake, listening to distant hoofbeats and the low murmur of men's voices carried on the wind. She was grateful for the camp's concealment, and for the discipline that held the Apache in complete silence. Even the smallest children seemed to grasp what was at stake. Kainu did not return until well past midnight. Etta, sleepless and alert, waited behind the hanging blanket. When she heard him enter, she pushed it aside. He stood by the dying fire, a dark shape against the embers, unfastening his weapons. In the faint glow, she saw something wet and blackened on his arm. "You're hurt," she said, stepping forward. Kainu glanced at the deep gash along his upper arm, blood still seeping. "It is nothing." She recognized the stubborn pride at once. "Sit down. Let me see it." "Please." After a moment he complied, lowering himself beside the fire. Etta fetched water and clean cloths, kneeling before him as she wiped away the blood. "What happened?" she asked softly. "A soldier saw movement," Kainu said. "He fired into the brush." Her hands paused. "You could have been killed." "But I was not." His voice stayed even, though she felt the tension beneath his skin as she examined the wound. "This needs stitches," she said. "Sarah is asleep, and it's bleeding too much to wait." She rose and retrieved the small sewing kit she had carried from Copper Ridge. "I've done this before, on injured miners." Kainu studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. By firelight, Etta sterilized the needle and threaded it carefully. "This will hurt." "Pain teaches," Kainu replied. She worked swiftly, impressed by how still he remained as the needle pierced his skin again and again. Only the faint flare of his nostrils betrayed the strain. So close, she noticed things she hadn't before. The intricate tattoo circling his arm, old scars etched across his copper skin, the unexpected softness of his dark hair when it brushed her fingers. "Why did you agree to marry me?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Kainu's dark eyes fixed on hers. You needed protection. There are many who need protection, Etta said, tying off another stitch. Why me? Silence stretched between them, long enough that she thought he would refuse to answer. Then, quietly, because I know what it is, he said, to lose everything. Etta's hands slowed, then stilled. What did you lose? My wife, my son. Kainu's voice did not waver, yet his eyes carried a weight far heavier than the sting of her needle. 3 winters ago, he continued. Smallpox, brought by traders. The words struck her hard. In all the time they had shared, he had never spoken of a family. I'm sorry, Etta whispered, meaning it more deeply than she expected. Kainu inclined his head once, accepting the sympathy without comment. Is that why? Etta hesitated, then went on. Why you said you wouldn't expect certain things from this marriage? He met her gaze. You still mourn them, she said quietly. I made that promise because it was what you needed to hear, Kainu replied, because you had already suffered enough violence from men. The clarity of his understanding, and the respect behind it, caught her off guard. She finished the final stitch in silence, and wrapped his arm with clean cloth. Thank you, Kainu said as she secured the bandage. You're welcome, Etta replied, suddenly aware of how close they were, of the intimacy of tending his wound in the hush of their shared shelter. Something softened in his expression, subtle but real. For a brief moment, neither moved, held in an unspoken current. Then Kainu rose smoothly, breaking it. You should rest, he said. Tomorrow will test us again. Etta withdrew behind her screen, but sleep would not come. Her thoughts circled the man she had married, the warrior revealed now as a husband, a father, a man who had loved and lost. Knowing this made him feel achingly human, and that made the careful distance she had promised herself harder to maintain. In the days that followed, tension tightened around the camp. Scouts reported the soldiers had set up a temporary base barely 10 miles away, far too close. Preparations began at once. The tribe would move, packing what they owned and turning toward their winter grounds earlier than planned. Etta worked beside the women, learning to dismantle the wickiup quickly and lash their belongings onto travois. To her surprise, some of the younger women began speaking to her, broken English mixed with gestures, teaching her essential Apache words and laughing as they corrected her attempts. On the 3rd night of preparations, as Etta helped ready food for the journey, a sudden disturbance rippled along the edge of camp. 2 warriors rode in hard, voices urgent. Kainu found her moments later, his face set. Come, he said, taking her arm and guiding her away from the watching eyes. When they were alone, he spoke in a low, urgent voice. The hail runners have been seen nearby. Her blood ran cold. Virex hail? Yes. They are moving with the soldiers now, claiming to be scouts. His jaw tightened. They are showing photographs, asking about survivors. Etta's chest constricted. They're looking for me. Yes. One of our scouts heard them describe a schoolteacher who escaped. There is a reward. We have to leave now, she said, fear surging. No, Kainu answered firmly. They are watching the trails we would need. If we move, the tribe is exposed, especially with you among us. Then I should leave, Etta Cole said, the words ripping from her chest. I'll draw them away from your people. Kainu's hand closed around her wrist, firm yet unexpectedly gentle despite the strain etched across his face. You would be captured before a day passed. Then what choice do we have? She demanded, panic sharpening her voice. His gaze held hers, unshaken. You must become Apache in truth, not only in appearance. She stared at him. What does that mean? A ceremony, he said. Sacred. It would bind you to the people in the eyes of the spirits. The marriage alone is not enough. Etta struggled to grasp it. How would that help? If soldiers stop us, Kainu said, you would move, speak, and live as my wife in every visible way. They would see you are not taken, but chosen. Can something like that be learned so quickly? Not learned, he replied. Changed. He hesitated. This is not done lightly. Once you are joined this way, part of you will always belong to us. To this land. The weight of his words pressed down on her. What he offered was not a disguise. It was surrender. An ending. Yet what remained of her former life? Copper Ridge was ash. The schoolteacher she had been no longer existed. What must I do? She asked quietly. The ceremony began at dusk. Under Sarah's watchful direction, Etta was led into a sweat lodge. Heat wrapped around her, thick and suffocating. Her skin was cleansed, then marked with sacred symbols. Beads and feathers were woven into her hair. Sarah pressed a cup into her hands, a bitter, earthy tea. It will open your eyes beyond sight, the old woman said. When night fully claimed the sky, Etta was guided to a stone circle beyond the camp. Firelight flickered over gathered faces. Drums began to beat, slow, steady, matching the rhythm of her heart. Kainu stood at the center. His body was painted like hers, though the markings were different, older, heavier with meaning. As she stepped into the circle, he extended his hands. She placed hers in his, feeling the strength there, the certainty. What followed was both terrifying and vast. The drums, the chanting, the firelight, perhaps the tea as well, blurred the edges of reality. Etta felt herself stretch beyond skin and bone, rooted into the earth, lifted toward the stars. She saw herself soaring with eagles over endless desert, running with wolves through moonlit canyons, standing unmoving like ancient trees as seasons passed. Through it all, Kainu was there, anchoring her, his presence steady and unyielding. His dark eyes reflected the same journey, the same crossing. At the ceremony's peak, Sahra bound their hands with a cord woven from horsehair, speaking words Etta somehow understood without knowing the language. The tribe answered as one, voices rising into the night. Then Kainu did something he had never done before. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her. The kiss wasn't part of the ritual. She knew that instantly. His lips were warm, unexpectedly gentle. It lasted only a moment, yet it carried a force that left her breathless. When he drew back, his eyes searched hers, waiting for fear, for rejection. Etta found neither. Only a sudden, overwhelming sense of belonging she had never known, not in Boston, not on the frontier, not anywhere. Now, Kainu said softly, you are truly my wife. That night, for the first time, there was no hanging blanket between them. They did not touch. Yet Etta Cole felt Kainu's presence in every breath of the small wickiup. The quiet weight of him, the new bond forged between them. Something deeper than the agreement that had first brought them together. At first light, the camp moved. The Apache broke apart and flowed into the mountains with practiced ease, following hidden paths known only to them. Etta rode behind Kainu on his horse, her arms around his waist, her body learning his rhythm, her balance matching his without thought. They traveled in scattered groups, stretched across miles, difficult to follow, impossible to surround. 3 days into the journey, the test came. Cavalry soldiers rounded a bend in the trail without warning, rifles lifting as they spotted the Apache riders. "Hold!" the lieutenant barked. "State your business in this territory." Kainu brought his horse to a calm stop and answered in controlled English. "We are traveling to our winter grounds. We have permission from the Indian agent." The lieutenant's eyes narrowed, then widened as they settled on Etta. "Ma'am," he said sharply, "are you being held here against your will?" She felt the tension ripple through Kainu's body. This was the moment they had prepared for. Etta straightened, drawing on everything the ceremony had given her, everything she had learned by watching Apache women face the world with quiet strength. "I am with my husband and our people by choice," she said clearly, her hands steady at Kainu's waist. The lieutenant studied her, doubt written plain across his face. "Your husband? You claim you married this man willingly?" "She is my wife," Kainu said, his voice low and unquestionable. "We travel with my grandmother and kin to join our people for winter." Another soldier rode forward, his stare fixed on Etta with unsettling focus. "Lieutenant, she could be the schoolteacher Virex Hale is hunting, the one from that mining town." Etta's heart slammed, but her face did not betray it. "I know nothing of any mining town," she said evenly. "I have lived with these people since my parents died of fever 2 years ago." The lieutenant's gaze traced her braided hair, her buckskin dress, the faint Apache markings still visible on her hands. "Your name, ma'am?" Without hesitation, she answered, "Aloop." The name Sarah had given her, Beauty of Sunrise. The soldier dismounted. "Let me get a closer look, Lieutenant." Kainu's muscles tightened beneath her hands, ready to explode. The moment stretched, thin as a blade. Then another voice cut in. "That's enough, Corporal." A cavalry captain rode into view, uniform dust-stained but authority absolute. "Lieutenant, what's the issue?" "Sir," the lieutenant replied, "these Apache are traveling through. The woman appears to be white. Corporal believes she may be the missing schoolteacher." The captain studied Etta, then shifted his gaze to Kainu. Something like recognition crossed his face. "Kainu," he said slowly. "It's been a long while." To Etta's surprise, Kainu inclined his head in acknowledgement. "You know him, sir?" the lieutenant asked, stunned. "He served as a scout during the Comanche campaign in '62. The captain replied. The captain spoke again, his tone measured. "One of the finest trackers I've ever worked with." His gaze returned to Etta Cole. "And this woman is your wife?" "Yes," Kainu answered without hesitation. Miles Ardent studied them both, then gave a slow nod. "The Apache don't take white captives anymore. It draws too much trouble. If she says she stands with him, I believe her." His eyes hardened as they cut to the insistent soldier. "As for Virex Hale's missing schoolteacher, there's no proof she lived through that raid." He lifted a hand. "Let them pass." The lieutenant hesitated. "Sir, our orders." "Our orders are to keep the peace with tribes that cooperate," the captain cut in sharply. "This group has shown no hostility." He turned back to Kainu. "Safe travel to your winter grounds." Kainu inclined his head. "Thank you, Captain." As they rode away, Etta kept her back straight, aware of eyes burning into her spine. Only when the soldiers were far behind did she sag forward against Kainu, her body trembling as the fear finally broke free. "You held yourself well," Kainu said quietly. "You knew the captain?" Etta murmured, her cheek near his shoulder. "Yes." His voice carried a weight she hadn't heard before. "There was a time I believed cooperation might shield my people. I believed it, for a season." The bitterness beneath his words needed no explanation. They rode on in silence until Etta spoke again. "The man who recognized me, he wasn't truly a soldier, was he?" "No," Kainu replied, his back stiffening. "One of Virex Hale's men, wearing a uniform when it suits him. I knew his face from the town." "And when the captain isn't there?" Fear crept back into her voice. Kainu reached down and closed his hand over hers at his waist. A rare, grounding touch. By tomorrow we will reach the winter grounds. Among all our people, we will be harder to touch. The winter grounds were nothing like Etta had imagined. Instead of an exposed camp, the Apache had built a hidden settlement deep within a sheltered canyon. Natural caves, reinforced with brush wickiups, housed dozens of families. A clear stream cut through the center, while towering cliffs offered protection and watch points shaped by centuries of use. The gathering was far larger than the small band she had known. As Kainu's group arrived, voices rose in welcome. Etta felt the curious weight of many gazes, but they held more interest than hostility. "Many bands gather here for winter," Kainu explained as he helped her down from the horse. "Some have never seen a white woman living as one of us." Sarah approached, speaking quickly to Kainu in Apache. He answered with short phrases, gesturing toward the mountains they had crossed. The old woman's expression tightened with concern. "What is it?" Etta asked when the exchange paused. "Hale's men are still searching," Kainu said. "Sarah says other bands have seen them. They offer more money now, for news of you." Etta felt the cold grip of dread close again. "They won't stop, will they?" "No," Kainu replied grimly. "Men like Virex Hale never do. Their pride won't allow it." That evening, Etta Cole was brought before the larger council, where she met the chief, Tovan, a weathered man whose steady gaze carried the same gravity she had come to recognize in Kainu. The council listened as Kainu laid out their situation, eyes drifting to Etta with looks that ranged from wary concern to open doubt. When the discussion shifted fully into Apache, she could no longer follow the words. But the tightening air made it clear the matter divided them. At last, Tovan raised his hand, silencing the circle. He spoke to Kainu with firm authority, tempered by restraint. Later, in their new dwelling, a shallow cave reinforced with brush walls, Kainu explained the council's decision. "We will stay here through winter. In the spring, Tovan believes we must move farther west, away from the army routes and men like Virex Hale." "Farther from white settlements?" Etta said, grasping the meaning. Kainu nodded. "It would be safer for everyone." She sank onto the sleeping furs, the weight of it settling in. "And I would go with you." Firelight traced his features as she searched his face. "Our arrangement was meant to last only until I could return safely to my world." Kainu knelt before her, his expression more open than she had ever seen it. "Is that still what you want? To return to a world that failed you, one that still hunts you?" The question struck deep. Copper Ridge was ash. Any new settlement would carry the same shadow of pursuit. And now, after weeks among the Apache, after a ceremony that had altered something within her, the thought of returning felt not only dangerous, but empty. "I don't know what I want anymore," she admitted. He lifted his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her cheek, the first time he had done so outside ritual or necessity. "Then stay until you do." The warmth of his touch ignited what had been building since the ceremony. Etta leaned into his palm, almost without thinking. "Kainu," she whispered, unsure of the question in her voice. He understood. He leaned in and kissed her, this time unhurried, deliberate. The kiss deepened, carrying intention beyond duty. Her hands found his shoulders, steady and strong, the same strength that had anchored her since the world fell apart. When he drew back, his eyes were dark with feeling. "Our arrangement," he said roughly, "can change, if you wish it." Her heart raced. This was the moment when pretense could become truth. She thought of empty promises once made to her, then of the man before her, quiet, unyielding, and faithful to every word he had given. "I do wish it," she said. That night, their marriage became real, not in haste, but with care and tenderness that softened the edges of his warrior strength. In his arms, Etta discovered a closeness she had never known, and afterward, resting against him, she felt a belonging that crossed every boundary she had once believed fixed. As winter deepened, so did their bond. Etta learned Apache crafts, cooking, and the first lessons of the hunt. The women who once watched her with guarded eyes welcomed her into their circles, teaching her their language with patient resolve. Sahra observed Etta's transformation from a distance, offering at last a small, grudging nod of approval. One evening, as they sat side by side scraping hides, the old woman spoke without warning. "You have changed," she said in her rough English. "When my grandson brought you here, I thought you would flee at the first chance. Back to your own people." Etta kept the scraper moving across the deer hide. "I learned my people are not as simple as I once believed." Sahra nodded slowly. "The spirit saw that in you. That is why they accepted you in the ceremony." She paused, fixing Etta with a gaze sharp enough to cut. "My grandson, after his wife and son were taken, he was walking, eating, fighting, but dead here." She pressed a hand to her chest. "Now he lives again." Heat crept into Etta's face. "I never expected to feel for him the way I do." "Love comes like rain in the desert," Sahra said, her voice carrying an unexpected poetry. "Rare, sudden, and it brings life where there was only dust." The word love lingered between them. Was that what this was? The fierce need to protect him, the steady calm she felt at his side, the heat that sparked with a single look. It was nothing like what she had known with James in Boston. No polite rituals, no empty promises. This was raw, elemental, like the land itself, sometimes harsh but honest. As if drawn by her thoughts, Kainu appeared at the edge of the clearing, returning from a hunt with several warriors. Even from a distance, Etta sensed something was wrong. His posture was tight, urgent. The men moved quickly toward the chief's dwelling. Sahra saw it too. "Go," she told Etta. "Learn what troubles them." By the time Etta reached their cave, Kainu was already inside, gathering weapons with swift, practiced movements. "What happened?" she asked, fear tightening her throat at the sight of him preparing for war. Kainu looked up, his face set. "Varex Hale's men attacked one of our hunting parties near the eastern ridge. 2 warriors are dead." His voice hardened. "They took their scalps." Horror swept through her. "Oh God, because of me? Are they coming here?" "No," Kainu said firmly. "This is not because of you. This is what they wanted, to hunt Apache, to provoke us, so they can bring the army down on all our people." He strapped a knife to his thigh. "We must find them first. End this before it spreads." "You're going after them," Etta said, panic rising. "How many?" 6, maybe 8. We will be 12. "Kainu, please." She caught his arm. "These men are killers. They burned an entire town." He cupped her face in his hands. "And they will destroy my people if we show weakness. This is our way, Etta. We protect what is ours. The finality in his voice left no room for argument. This was the warrior she had married, unyielding, bound by duty and honor, ready to stand between his people and annihilation. "When?" she asked, her voice barely steady. "Within the hour. We return when it is finished." His thumbs brushed her cheeks, gentle despite the steel in him. "Be strong, listen to Sahra." He hesitated, then added quietly, "If I do not return, she will know what must be done." The ground seemed to tilt beneath Etta Cole. The thought of losing him now, just as this fragile happiness had taken root, was unbearable. "Promise me you'll come back," she said, gripping his wrists. Kainu's dark eyes held hers. "I promise to fight with all my strength to return to you." It was the truest vow he could give, and she knew it, even as it broke her heart. She rose on her toes and kissed him, pouring into that single moment everything she could not say. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "I go to fight for our future," he said softly, "for all we might build together." Then he turned and was gone, striding toward the warriors gathered at the center of camp. Etta watched as faces were painted with war marks, weapons checked, horses mounted. She saw the pride with which the women sent their men away, the quiet acceptance of what duty demanded. She tried to mirror their strength, standing tall as Kainu rode past. He met her gaze once, intense, unwavering, then vanished into the winter dusk with the war party. The waiting was agony. Hours stretched into a day, then 2. Etta threw herself into camp work to still her thoughts, but fear never left her. At night she lay alone in the furs, remembering his warmth, the safety of his arms, the low cadence of his voice in the dark. On the 3rd day, as the evening meal was being prepared, a cry rose from the canyon, horses approaching. The camp froze. Women reached for children, older boys for weapons. Etta's heart hammered as she ran with the others toward the narrow mouth of the canyon. The riders emerged, Apache warriors returning, but fewer than had gone. Etta searched their faces, the world narrowing to one terrible question. Then she saw him near the rear, steadying a wounded warrior across his lap. Relief hit her so hard her knees nearly failed. He was alive, bloodied, exhausted, but alive. Joy and grief mingled as the warriors were welcomed back. 3 had not returned. 2 more were badly wounded. As the camp gathered, the story came in fragments of English and Apache. They had tracked Virex Hale's men to an abandoned mining camp. The fight had been brutal. All of the enemy were dead, Virex Hale among them, killed by Kainu's hand. The victory had come at a price. When the wounded were taken to Oren, and the first chaos ebbed, Etta found Kainu alone at the stream, washing blood from his arms and face. His expression was distant, unreachable, still half in the world of battle. She approached carefully, sensing the darkness he carried. "You're hurt," she said, seeing the deep gash along his ribs that he seemed to ignore. He glanced down, as if noticing it for the first time. "It is nothing. Let me tend it," Etta said, already gathering clean cloths and the healing herbs Sarah had taught her to use. As she worked, slowly, steadily, Kainu returned, breath by breath, from the place the fight had taken him back to her. His body eased little by little beneath her hands. His breathing slowed, the tension draining away. "Virex Hale?" she asked at last, her voice low. "Dead," Kainu answered. "He will hunt no one ever again." Etta's fingers paused against the bandage. The man who had burned her town, slaughtered her neighbors, and chased her across the territory was gone. She had expected relief, closure, even satisfaction. Instead, a hollow stillness settled in her chest. "Did it bring peace to the spirits of your wife and son?" she asked softly. "Killing him?" Kainu looked at her, surprise flickering before understanding took its place. "Revenge is not peace," he said simply, "but protecting those I care for, that brings rest." He had almost said love. Etta felt it, the unspoken word that had hovered between them for weeks, growing heavier with every shared silence. She finished securing the bandage and sat beside him at the stream's edge. "I was afraid you wouldn't come back," she admitted. Kainu took her hand, his scarred fingers threading through hers. "I made a promise." "Yes," she whispered, leaning her head against his shoulder. "You did." They stayed that way as dusk settled, the stream murmuring, the camp alive with small sounds, children laughing, fires crackling, low voices carrying through the canyon. For the first time since the hail runners had thundered into Copper Ridge, the tight knot of fear inside her began to loosen. "What happens now?" Etta asked. Kainu's arm slipped around her, drawing her close. "Now we live," he said, "day by day, season by season." There were no grand declarations in it, no poetry, yet in its quiet certainty, it was everything she needed. That night, in the privacy of their home, they came together with a fierce tenderness shaped by separation, and danger survived. Later, cradled against him, Etta thought of the path that had led her here. From Boston parlors to a frontier schoolhouse, from hunted woman to Apache wife. Each step had stripped something false away, until only truth remained. "I love you," she whispered into the dark. The words came easily now. Kainu's arms tightened around her. "And I love you, Maya Lope," he said, using her Apache name, Beauty of Sunrise. "From the moment I saw you standing alone against impossible odds, I knew your spirit matched mine." She smiled against his chest. "Is that why you were so silent those first weeks? Because you were falling in love with me?" A low chuckle rumbled from him, rare enough to make her heart leap. "I was confused," he admitted. "I swore I would never love again after losing my family. And then you stood before me, breaking everything I believed. About white women, about my own heart." His hand moved through her hair with quiet reverence. "Now I understand. The spirit sometimes grants second chances, new beginnings that look nothing like we expect." Etta lifted herself on one elbow, studying his face in the dim glow of the fire, knowing, without doubt, that this beginning was real. "Is that what we are?" Etta Cole asked quietly. "A new beginning?" "Yes," Kainu answered with calm certainty. "For both of us. Perhaps for our people as well, if others could see what we have found." It was a fragile hope, almost impossible, yet necessary, the belief that the gulf between their worlds might be crossed by a love like theirs, a hope worth shaping an entire life around. Spring arrived in the Arizona mountains in a burst of color. Valleys that had lain brown and lifeless only weeks before erupted with wildflowers. Streams swelled with snowmelt pouring down from the high ridges. The tribe began preparing to leave the winter grounds, packing what they owned for the long journey to the summer hunting lands. 6 months into her life, among the Apache, Etta moved with the ease of someone who belonged. Her skin had darkened under the sun, her hands toughened from work, and Apache words now came naturally to her tongue, though complex conversations still challenged her. "You'll need to secure that tighter," Kainu said, watching as she loaded their belongings onto the travois. "The trail to the summer grounds is steep." She adjusted the leather ties and glanced up at him with a smile. "Better?" He nodded, then surprised her by pulling her briefly into his arms. "Much better," he murmured near her ear. Public affection was rare among the Apache, which made the moment all the more precious. Etta leaned into him for a heartbeat before returning to the work at hand. A stir at the canyon entrance caught their attention. A rider had arrived, one of the scouts sent ahead to check the route. He spoke urgently to Tovin, his face drawn tight. "What's happening?" Etta asked. "Soldiers," Kainu replied, his voice tense. "A new fort is being built near our summer hunting grounds. Many soldiers." A chill settled deep in her bones. "Does that change everything?" Before he could answer, Sarah approached, her expression set and unyielding. "The council meets," she said to Kainu. Now. The debate lasted for hours. Etta waited with the other women, anxiety coiling tighter as voices rose and fell from within the council circle. When Kainu finally emerged, his face was dark with restrained fury. What did they decide? Etta asked, hurrying to keep pace with him. We are divided, he said sharply. Some, like Tovan, believe we must move farther west to survive. Others say we must stay and fight for the land that has always been ours. And you? She asked. He stopped and turned to face her. I believe in survival, he said quietly, in protecting what matters most. His gaze locked onto hers. You matter most. The simplicity of it stole her breath. What does that mean for us? It means I have offered another path, Kainu said, taking her hands. For those willing to follow. He spoke of a valley beyond the western mountains, a place where some of their people had already gone, beyond the army's reach, beyond constant pursuit. A place where we might build something new, a place of peace. You want to leave the tribe? The thought stunned her. Kainu was a warrior, deeply rooted in Apache life. Not leave, he corrected softly. Lead. Guide those who wish to come. Create a new beginning, away from this endless cycle of blood and loss. Etta struggled to take in the weight of what he was offering. Because of me? She asked quietly. Because I'm white? Because I complicate things for the tribe? No, Kainu said without hesitation. Because I have seen enough death. Because Virex Hale's end brought no joy, only more emptiness. And because I want our children to grow up in peace. Our children? The words struck her like a pulse through her chest. They had never spoken of children aloud, though the idea lived unspoken between them. The image came unbidden, a child with Kainu's dark eyes and steady strength, and her heart swelled. Will they follow you? She asked. Who would come with us? Some, he said. My cousins, their families, others who are tired of fighting and running. He brushed his fingers along her cheek. But even if no one came, I would still go, with you alone, if that is all. The certainty of it humbled her. When? In 3 days, before the main tribe leaves for the summer grounds. Those days passed in a rush of preparation and quiet goodbyes. To Etta's surprise, nearly 30 people chose to follow Kainu, mostly young families, a few elders, and Sarah, who declared she was too old to keep running from soldiers. On the morning they departed, Tovan performed a blessing for the splinter group. His face remained stern, but when he embraced Kainu, Etta saw unmistakable pride in the old chief's eyes. He's proud of you, she said as they mounted their horses. Even if he doesn't agree. Kainu watched Tovan return to the main camp. He has walked the warrior's path his entire life, he said quietly. He knows no other way. Then, with rare vulnerability, he added, I hope I am not leading them into disaster. Etta reached across the space between their horses and took his hand. You're leading them toward hope, she said. That's never a disaster. The journey west tested them all. They crossed lands unfamiliar to most of the group, guided by stories Kainu remembered from elders and the cautious aid of friendly tribes. Twice they narrowly avoided army patrols. Once they hid for 2 days in a narrow canyon while hostile Ash Ridge folk moved through nearby. Through it all, Etta saw Kainu change. The quiet warrior became a true leader, seeking counsel, explaining his choices, showing patience with elders and children alike. His dignity remained, but it was joined by openness, by a willingness to carry the weight with others. On the 20th day, they crested a ridge and saw it. A green valley spread below, cradled by protective mountains, a river cutting bright and living through its heart. Even from afar, Etta could see the shimmer of water, the deep grass, the trees scattered thick enough for shelter and building. "It's beautiful," she breathed. Beside her, Kainu straightened in his saddle, peace settling into his features. Our new beginning. They descended into the valley as spirits lifted all around them. Near the river they found fresh game trails, signs that others had passed this way before. By sunset, a temporary camp stood along the water. Fires burned, shelters rose, and a quiet pride filled the air. They had made it. Against every expectation, they had found their promised land. That night, Etta Cole and Kainu walked along the river beneath a sky thick with stars. The air carried the scent of sage and pine, cool against their skin, but gentle, not biting. Coyotes called to one another in the distance, their lonely, untamed voices echoing through the valley. Strangely, the sound made Etta feel rooted rather than afraid. "Are you happy?" Kainu asked, his arm resting around her waist, drawing her close. She thought carefully, honoring the honesty that had shaped everything between them. "I'm at peace," she said at last. "More than I ever believed possible after Copper Ridge." She tilted her head up toward him. "Are you?" "I am whole again," he answered simply. "Because of you." Etta stopped, turning to face him fully. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with anticipation. "Kainu, there's something I need to tell you." She drew in a steadying breath. "I'm going to have a child. Our child." For a heartbeat, he stood frozen, his face unreadable in the moonlight. Then, with a sudden joy that startled a laugh from her, he lifted her off the ground and spun her in a full circle, all restraint forgotten. "When?" he asked, setting her down, his hands careful on her waist. "With the autumn," she said softly. "Sarah believes so. She's known for 2 weeks but made me wait to be certain." His hand slid over hers, warm against her still flat belly. "A child," he whispered, awe filling his voice. "Our child." Tears blurred Etta's vision. She remembered Sarah's quiet stories of Kainu's first wife and the son he had lost. This life would never replace them, but it marked healing, a future no longer defined only by grief. "I never thought I would be a father again," Kainu admitted, his voice rough. "After my son died, I closed that part of my heart." "I know," Etta said gently. "Are you afraid?" He considered the question, as he always did. "Yes," he said finally, "but not enough to let fear steal our joy." They stood together by the river, her head against his chest, his arms secure around her, both thinking of the life growing between them and the home rising around them. For once, the world was quiet. The weeks that followed were filled with purpose. Under Kainu's guidance, permanent wiki-ups and small adobe homes rose along the riverbank. Fields were planted in the rich soil, corn, beans, and squash in the Apache way, joined by seeds Etta had carried from far away. Hunting parties mapped the surrounding mountains, marking water sources and game trails. By midsummer, the settlement had taken form, a careful harmony of Apache tradition and practical ideas Etta brought from her former life. A small schoolhouse was built, where Etta taught the children both Apache knowledge and the English they would need to survive a changing world, and others came. A small group of Ash Ridge folk seeking peace. The Lowen set, fleeing hatred from every side. Even a white trapper and his Navajo wife, Taya, drawn by whispers of a place where such bonds were not condemned. Kainu welcomed them all, laying down one unbreakable law. Anyone who came in peace would be treated with dignity, no matter who they had been or where they came from. It was a radical idea in a territory scarred by hatred and blood, yet in their hidden valley, It began to take root. Etta Cole's pregnancy unfolded without trouble. As her body changed, the women of the settlement closed around her with steady care and constant counsel, led by Sahra, who declared herself guardian of both Etta and the life growing inside her. "The child is strong," Sahra announced one evening, her weathered hands resting against Etta's rounded belly. "A warrior's spirit like the father," Kainu said from where he sat nearby, shaping a small wooden cradle with careful strokes. "Or a teacher's wisdom like the mother." Sahra snorted softly. "Both, perhaps. A new strength for a new kind of world." As autumn crept closer, carrying with it the promise of Etta's confinement, an unexpected presence disturbed their calm. A lone rider, white unmistakably so, appeared at the mouth of the valley. The sentries spotted him at once and sent word. Etta was helping with the corn harvest when Kainu found her. "Stay near the center of the settlement," he told her, his face set. "A white man approaches, alone." Fear, long absent, surged back into her chest. "One of Virex Hale's men?" "I do not think so," Kainu said, though uncertainty edged his voice. He brushed her cheek with his fingers. "Promise me you will stay where it is safe." Etta nodded, her hand instinctively covering her belly. "I promise." She watched as Kainu rode out with several warriors to meet the stranger. The settlement seemed to hold its breath. Women pulling children close, men laying hands on weapons they had hoped never to use again. When the riders returned, the white man rode calmly among them. As they drew nearer, recognition struck Etta hard. "Captain Miles Ardent," she whispered, the officer who had once let them pass, the man who had known Kainu as a scout. Ardent dismounted in the center of the settlement and removed his hat as he approached her. His eyes flicked briefly to her swollen belly, surprise softening his expression, but his courtesy never faltered. "Mrs. Kainu," he said with a respectful nod. "You look well." "Captain," Etta replied, aware of every gaze fixed on them. "What brings you here?" "I've been following your group for some time," Ardent admitted. "Unofficially, on my own initiative." "Why?" Kainu asked, his stance rigid despite the man's calm demeanor. Ardent looked between them. "Because what you're doing here matters, more than you realize." He explained that tensions between the army and the Apache had worsened. New commanders, ignorant of tribal ways, had imposed brutal policies. Reservations were being formed, places where the government intended to force all Apache, whether they submitted willingly or not. "It's going to get worse before it improves," Ardent said quietly. He gestured toward the settlement. The children playing, the shared fires, the mingled lives. "What you've built here could be another way, a living example of coexistence." "You want to report us," Kainu said flatly. "Turn us into a test for white men's laws." "No," Ardent answered at once. "I want to help keep this place hidden, to protect it." A murmur of disbelief spread through the gathered people. A white officer offering to shield them from the very army he served. "Why?" Etta asked softly, giving voice to the question hanging in the air. Miles Ardent's weathered face carried no disguise of feeling. "I've spent 15 years in this territory," he said. "I've watched too many people die, Apache and soldier alike. And I've learned this much. Answers won't come from Washington, and they won't come from war chiefs either. They'll come from people willing to imagine another way." That night, a council gathered to decide how to answer Ardent's unexpected offer. The circle was tense. Many distrusted any understanding with a man of the army, no matter how sincere he appeared. "He could be laying a snare," one warrior warned, "drawing us into the open." "If he meant to betray us, he would have brought soldiers," another argued. "He came alone." Through it all, Kainu remained quiet, weighing every voice. When the arguments were spent, he turned to Etta Cole. "What do you think, wife?" he asked. "You know the ways of white men." The weight of the question settled heavily on her shoulders. Her answer could shape the fate of everyone there. "I believe he speaks honestly," she said at last. "But honesty can change. Commanders change. We should accept his help and keep our guard raised." Kainu nodded, resolve settling in his eyes. "We will work with the captain," he said, "but on our terms. This valley is our refuge, not a government-proving ground." When they delivered the decision, Ardent exhaled in clear relief. "I'll do what I can from where I stand," he promised. "Redirect patrols. Keep this place off the maps. Maybe even help with supplies when possible." He glanced around the settlement, admiration plain in his gaze. "What you've built here deserves time to grow." Before leaving the next morning, Ardent drew Etta aside. "There's something else you should hear," he said quietly. "News from outside." Her muscles tightened. "What news?" "Copper Ridge is being rebuilt," he told her. "Some survivors returned. They speak of reopening the school. They wonder if you might come back someday." The words struck her harder than she expected. Copper Ridge, restored. A life she once knew standing open again. Months ago, that news would have torn her apart. Now, with Kainu's child stirring within her and a living community rising around her, the past felt far away, like a story no longer hers. "Thank you for telling me," she said sincerely. "But my place is here. This is my home now. These are my people." Ardent studied her face, then nodded. "I thought as much. Still, you deserved to know." After he rode away, Etta found Kainu standing at the edge of the settlement, eyes fixed on the valley that had become their sanctuary. "He told you about Copper Ridge," Kainu said. It was not a question. "Yes." She slipped her hand into his. "He thought I might want to return." Kainu's fingers closed around hers. "And do you?" Etta turned him toward her, resting her palm against his cheek. "My home is with you," she said quietly. "My future is here, with our child, with the people we're building this life for." A soft smile touched her lips. "My heart chose that long ago. It just took my mind a little longer to catch up." Relief softened Kainu's face, followed by a depth of love that stole Etta Cole's breath. "I would have let you go," he said quietly, "if that had truly been what you wanted." "I know," she answered. "That's one of the many reasons I stayed." When the first autumn leaves drifted down from the cottonwoods, their child came into the world. A son with Etta's lighter skin and Kainu's dark, solemn eyes. They named him Rook, for the thunder that rolled through the valley the night he was born, a storm that seemed to announce him to the world. Cradling her son in the pale hush of dawn, Etta marveled at the road that had led her here, from fear to safety, from solitude to belonging, from a marriage born of necessity to a love that had remade her life. Kainu sat beside them, his features softened by a tenderness few beyond their circle ever witnessed. He brushed one reverent finger along the baby's tiny hand. "He is perfect," he whispered. "A beginning." Etta leaned into his shoulder, weary and utterly content. Outside their dwelling, the settlement stirred awake, Apache voices mingling with those of the Ash Ridge folk, Navajo and English, a harmony that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. Children called to one another on their way to Etta's school. Hunters readied themselves for the last harvest before winter closed in. It was a community unlike any other in the territory, imperfect, sometimes strained, yet alive with promise. "Our son will grow in a world we helped shape," Etta murmured, studying Rook's peaceful face. "A world where he belongs fully." Kainu nodded, drawing her close. "He will know strength and compassion," he said, "the best of both his bloodlines." As if answering, the baby opened his eyes, fixing them on his parents with a gaze so intent it made them both laugh. "Already questioning everything," Kainu said with pride. "Like his father," Etta teased. "And his mother," Kainu replied with a rare smile. They sat together, a family forged in violence and prejudice, yet rising beyond both to create something new and fragile. Beyond their walls, their living experiment in harmony grew, one day at a time. 5 years later, Etta stood at the edge of the settlement as riders appeared from the east, 3 figures moving at an easy pace that carried neither threat nor haste. At her side, 5-year-old Rook bounced with excitement. "Is it Captain Ardent?" he asked, squinting into the morning sun. "I think it is," Etta said, recognizing Miles Ardent's straight-backed posture even at a distance. "And he's brought others with him." In 5 years, the settlement had changed profoundly. What began as a desperate flight had become a thriving home for more than 100 souls. Apache, Ash Ridge folk, Navajo, and a handful of whites who had married into tribal families or sought a different life than the divided world beyond the valley. Ardent had become their most unlikely ally, arriving several times each year with news and occasional supplies, quietly using his influence to keep patrols away. His connections still mattered. Kainu joined them, resting a steady hand on Rook's shoulder. Their son had grown quick and observant, carrying his father's quiet gravity and his mother's restless curiosity. He spoke Apache and English with equal ease, moving naturally between the worlds that shaped him. "Ardent brings new people," Kainu said, his voice calm, his eyes sharp as he measured the approaching riders. A familiar surge of protectiveness rose in Etta Cole's chest. Every newcomer carried promise and danger for a community as carefully balanced as theirs. "Settlers," she murmured. "We'll see." Kainu gave her hand a brief, steady squeeze. "Trust your husband's judgment, wife." The teasing warmth in his voice drew a small smile from her despite the tension. Years together had softened some of his edges, but not his vigilance. What they had built was precious, and he guarded it fiercely. New arrivals were always measured with care before welcome was offered. As the riders neared, Etta saw Miles Ardent accompanied by a white couple, middle-aged, dust-worn but well-kept. The woman's bonnet hid part of her face, yet something in her bearing tugged at Etta's memory. Ardent dismounted first, greeting Kainu with the easy respect of long acquaintance. "My friend," he said, clasping the Apache's forearm. "I've brought visitors who've traveled far to find this place." The couple dismounted more slowly. The woman moved awkwardly, as if unused to long hours in the saddle. When she straightened and pushed back her bonnet, Etta froze, then gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Nell," she whispered, scarcely believing her eyes. The girl, no longer a child, but a young woman with clear eyes and a radiant smile, stepped forward. "Miss Cole," she said, voice trembling with joy. "I knew you were alive." Etta crossed the distance as if in a waking dream and pulled her into an embrace, holding tight to someone from a life she thought had been erased. "How?" she began, pulling back to search the familiar lines now changed by time. "My father and I were visiting family in Tucson when the Hail Runners attacked Copper Ridge," Nell Rowe said, tears shining. "When we came back, everything was gone. Everyone said you must have died too, but I never believed it." The man beside her stepped forward, broad-shouldered, the unmistakable build of a blacksmith now threaded with gray. Guide Rowe nodded. When the captain spoke of a settlement led by an Apache warrior and his white wife, a school teacher, Nell was certain it had to be you. Kainu approached, Rook half hidden behind him, watching the reunion with bright curiosity. "You were Etta's student," Kainu said gently, the tone he kept for children and those needing reassurance. Nell nodded, eyes widening at his imposing presence. "Yes, sir. The best teacher Copper Ridge ever had." Emotion swelled as Etta turned to her husband. "Kainu, this is Nell Rowe and her father, Geed. They are dear friends from my life before." She beckoned. "Rook, come meet people who knew your mother when she taught in the White Settlement." The boy stepped forward with the easy confidence of a child, raised in safety and love. "Hello," he said politely, his English clear. "Welcome to our home." The simple greeting, living proof of the bridge Etta and Kainu had built, seemed to strike something deep in Geed Rowe. His weathered face softened as his gaze moved from Rook to Kainu to Etta. "We've heard stories," he said quietly, "of a place where Apache and whites live together in peace. I didn't believe it, until the captain convinced us to see for ourselves." "It is more than possible," Kainu replied, pride steady in his voice. "It is real, built day by day, sometimes with hardship, always with conviction." That evening, a feast was prepared in honor of the visitors. As tradition demanded, the entire settlement gathered to share food, stories, and judgment, to measure newcomers not by rumor, but by who they proved themselves to be among the people. Etta Cole found herself seated between two worlds, Nell Rowe at her left, a living memory of who she had once been, and Kainu at her right, the man who embodied the life she had chosen. Rook sprawled at her feet, listening wide-eyed as Nell recounted stories of his mother's past. "She was strict," Nell said with a grin, "but fair. She made us work hard, and she gave us books that opened whole worlds." "My mother still teaches," Rook announced proudly. "All the children learn, English, Apache, numbers, and stories." "Some things never change," Geed Rowe observed, studying Etta with quiet awe. "Though much else has." As the evening wore on, Miles Ardent drew Etta and Kainu aside. The warmth he'd shown earlier was replaced by something heavier. "Changes are coming to the territory," he said plainly. "Arizona will soon apply for statehood. Control is tightening. Tribes are being forced onto reservations more aggressively than ever." Kainu's jaw hardened. "And our valley? Our people?" "So far, I've kept this place off official maps," Ardent admitted. "But I'm retired now. My influence is fading." He looked between them. "What you've built here matters. It works. Different peoples living together with respect. It's what I always believed was possible." "But you fear it won't be allowed to continue," Etta said quietly. "I fear that without legal recognition, you remain vulnerable," Ardent replied, "which is why I've brought a proposal and why I brought these people." The plan, once laid bare, was bold in its simplicity. The settlement would petition for recognition, not as a reservation, but as a lawful township under territorial law. Guide Rowe and other respected whites would serve as the public face when necessary. A frontier town, diverse but legal, protected. "They would never allow it," Kainu said flatly. "The army wants my people controlled, not equal." "Not if they knew the full truth at first," Ardent countered, "which is why the presentation must be careful. Once recognized, what happens within your borders becomes far harder to challenge." Etta watched the conflict play across her husband's face. What was being proposed bordered on deception, but it might be the only shield strong enough to protect what they had built. "We will take this to the council," Kainu said at last. "Every voice will be heard." The debate that followed was fierce and stretched across days. Some, especially elders who carried deep scars from white authority, rejected any formal tie to the world that had brutalized them. Others saw the necessity of legal protection. Etta was struck by how much had changed in 5 years. The council now included Apache, Ash Ridge folk, members of the Lowen set, women alongside men, elders beside the young. It was governance born not of tradition alone, but of shared survival. On the third evening, as the council reached an impasse, Sarah rose slowly to her feet. Age had bent her frame, but not her spirit. Silence fell at once. "I have lived nearly 8 decades, she said, her voice thin yet steady in the night air. "I have seen my people driven from our lands, hunted, called less than human. I have buried husbands, children, grandchildren, taken by white soldiers and white disease." Her gaze swept the circle, unflinching. "I have also lived long enough to see something I never believed I would." She gestured toward the fire-lit faces. So many colors, so many histories. A place where our children sleep without fear, where blood does not decide worth, where we choose what we become. Sahara straightened as much as her years allowed. "If the world will not leave us in peace, then we must learn how to stand within it, without surrendering who we are." She paused, her dark eyes sweeping the circle. "I had every reason to hate the white world until my last breath," she said quietly. "Yet here I sit, in a place where my great-grandson," she nodded toward Rook, seated solemnly beside his father, allowed to observe the council as part of his learning, "carries both Apache and white blood, and where I have learned to see with new eyes." The old woman drew herself upright, gathering dignity despite her fragile frame. "This place is neither Apache nor white. It is something new." Her gaze held steady. "If we must play the white man's game of papers and permissions to protect it, then we should do so, not with shame, but with pride in what we have made." Her words tipped the balance. By dawn, the council reached agreement. They would pursue Miles Ardent's plan, bound by strict conditions that preserved their independence and way of life. In the weeks that followed, the settlement changed on the surface while remaining true at its core. A more conventional town front rose at the valley entrance, simple wooden buildings built under Guide Rowe's guidance, meant to satisfy territorial inspection. Beyond that facade, the heart of the community endured unchanged. Etta Cole found herself in an unexpected role, drafting the official documents that would establish their settlement, now formally named Harmony, at Ardent's suggestion, as a recognized township. Her Boston schooling, once so distant from her life among the Apache, proved invaluable as she navigated legal demands while carefully veiling the full nature of their home. "You build with words what I once built with my hands," Kainu observed one evening, watching her work by lamplight as she weighed every phrase of the charter. Etta looked up, catching the quiet pride in his eyes. "We're building it together," she said. "As we always have." Kainu's hand brushed her cheek, a tenderness that still warmed her after all these years. "From the day a stubborn white schoolteacher stood before me with a small knife and refused to show fear." Etta smiled at the memory. "I was terrified." "But something in your eyes told me I could trust you," he said softly. "And something in yours told me you were worth protecting, worth changing for." They had both changed. The proper Boston schoolteacher had become a woman who moved between worlds with ease, who could dress a deer as readily as diagram a sentence. The quiet warrior had become a thoughtful leader, devoted to peace, yet ready to defend what he loved. Together they had made something neither could have imagined alone. Not only their son, miracle enough, but a community that proved another way was possible. When territorial officials finally arrived to inspect the newly registered township of Harmony, they found exactly what Ardent intended them to see. A small, orderly frontier town with a schoolhouse, a blacksmith, a general store, and diligent residents. If they noticed the uncommon mix of people, or the Apache dwellings visible in the distance. They made no record of it. Harmony entered the territorial books without ceremony, another mark on the westward map. But for those who lived there, the acknowledgement meant everything. Recognition, however limited, of their right to choose their own future. On the evening after the officials rode out of the valley, the community gathered to celebrate in a way that felt entirely its own. Apache songs rose around a central fire, answered by fiddle tunes and rough-hewn dances from settler tradition. Children of every lineage darted between the adults, laughing, unself-conscious, belonging everywhere at once. Food from many kitchens was shared without ceremony. As dusk settled into night, Etta Cole stood slightly apart, watching with a heart too full for words. 5 years earlier, she had lost everything she believed defined her life. That loss had carried her here, to a happiness deeper and truer than anything she had known. Kainu came to her side, their shoulders brushing with the ease of long partnership. "What are you thinking, Alope?" he asked softly, using her Apache name as he did in private moments. "I'm thinking about journeys," she said, leaning into him. "How the hardest paths sometimes lead to the most beautiful places." His arm circled her waist, drawing her close. "And ours," he murmured. "Is it finished?" Etta looked out over the gathering, at Rook teaching younger children a game that blended Apache skill with European rules, at Sarah showing young white women the uses of healing plants, at former enemies sharing stories and laughter by the fire. "No," she said with quiet certainty. "This is only the beginning." In the years that followed, Harmony faced trials, from the land itself and from the world beyond the mountains. Not everyone who came seeking their way of life arrived with honest intent. Holding the balance between traditions demanded constant care, constant choice. Arizona's march toward statehood brought new pressures and new threats. Yet the foundation Etta and Kainu had laid proved resilient. Their marriage, begun as a matter of survival, became something rare. A true partnership, rooted in love and respect. Their son grew into a young man who moved easily between worlds, becoming a bridge between Harmony and the changing territory beyond. The township evolved from hidden refuge to deliberate example, proof that life on the frontier need not be only conquest or submission. Visitors came from far places to see what many believed impossible: genuine coexistence. Some stayed, weaving new threads into the community. Others left carrying the idea with them. One evening, Etta and Kainu stood again on the ridge where they had first looked down into the valley that became their home. Behind them rose the sounds of celebration. Music, laughter, many languages braided together, children calling out in play. "Did you imagine this?" Etta asked, gesturing toward the thriving settlement below. "That day you found me alone at the abandoned fort?" Kainu considered, as he always did. "I imagined protecting you," he said at last. "I did not imagine how you would protect me in return, or how together we would build something neither of us could make alone." Etta took his hand, the hand that had once killed to defend her, that had helped bring their son into the world, that had steadied her through years of change. "From survival to love to purpose," she said. "Our journey." "Our journey," Kainu agreed, turning to face her. In the gold of sunset, traces of the stern warrior she first met still lingered, but his eyes now held peace, a contentment that transformed him. He brushed a silver-streaked strand of hair from her face. "And I would choose it again," he said. "Every step." "Even marrying a stubborn white schoolteacher?" Etta Cole teased, her voice light. "Especially that part," Kainu answered, a rare smile touching his mouth, one he still saved almost entirely for her. Below them, a child's voice rang out, calling Rook by name, urging them back toward the fire and the music. Hand in hand, they walked down the ridge toward the life they had built. Toward a future shaped not by accident, but by choice, step after deliberate step. In a land scarred by conflict, they had carved out room for peace. In an age of rigid lines and hardened hearts, they had proven that love could cross boundaries others insisted were unbreakable. What began as a marriage forged for survival had become something enduring and fierce, a bond that reshaped not only their lives, but the lives of all who found refuge in the valley they called home. Their union stood as quiet defiance against a world that said such a thing could not last. And yet it did. Long after the fires dimmed and the songs softened into night, the legacy of their courage continued, carried in the laughter of children, in shared labor and shared grief, in a community that chose understanding over fear. It moved outward through lives changed by the simple, radical act of imagining a different way. Etta paused at the edge of the gathering, listening to the sound of it all, voices braided together, Apache words mingling with English, the steady heartbeat of a place that had learned how to belong to itself. Kainu's hand found hers again, warm and certain. Whatever storms waited beyond the mountains, they would meet them together. Not as a story of protection alone, but as a testament to what could grow when two people refused to surrender hope. And beneath the wide western sky, with the valley alive around them, they stepped forward, into tomorrow. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. We appreciate you more than you think. If this tale stirred something deep inside, we invite you to remain part of this frontier of memories. More true stories of honor, compassion, and destiny are waiting for you here. Subscribe, share, comment, and thank you for riding with us today. Aviso Legal Barra Disclaimer. Our content is designed for artistic and entertainment purposes and may reinterpret historical themes using fictional touches. We apply AI tools thoughtfully, only to support production, while keeping human supervision over editing, emotional tone, and narrative coherence. We always comply with regulatory guidelines for AI-based media and avoid deepfake practices or identity manipulation. All supporting components remain legally sourced. Please ask for authorization before sharing or adapting any segment. Your respect makes it possible for us to continue telling meaningful stories.